Brian slid the termination papers across the sleek conference table and said, "We need more driven talent who can hit higher targets." "The company is heading in a new direction," he added. "My name's Darren McCabe. I'm 46 years old and I spent 9 years as a senior account executive at Triana Corp in Kansas City, Missouri. Nearly a decade of my career went into building a client portfolio responsible for almost 40% of the company's revenue. No shortcuts, just long hours, constant travel, and relationships grounded in trust." I smiled, thanked Brian for the opportunity, and left without raising any objections. Brian Ellsworth joined us 6 months ago as the new vice president of sales. The CEO brought him in to breathe new life into the team. He wore tailored suits, relied on worn-out motivational cliches, and never once accompanied me on a client call. Just 3 weeks into the job, he rolled out a new commission structure that cut my earnings by 20%, despite my consistently solid results. The warning signs were there. My desk got shoved into a corner during office renovations. My name vanished from meeting invites. Just yesterday, I saw IT servicing my computer while I was out at lunch. Small details, easy to overlook, but enough to sense that something was coming. I packed 9 years of work into a single cardboard box: family photos, a coffee mug painted by my daughter, and a folder with client contacts I'd kept separate from the company database, just out of habit. "Need a hand with that?" Valerie from accounting asked, genuinely puzzled. "Are you moving offices?" "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to cause a scene. On the elevator ride down, I stood beside Everett Stanton, our CEO. He nodded without really seeing me, eyes glued to his phone. He had no clue what Brian had just done or how it would affect our quarterly projections, though he'd find out soon enough. Walking to my car, I didn't feel anger. Instead, there was a strange clarity, like waking up from a long, cozy dream only to realize the house was never truly yours. I drove home in silence. No calls, no radio, just thinking about what tomorrow might bring. My phone buzzed as I pulled into the driveway. Travis Herricks, my biggest client, texting about dinner reservations for when he'd be in town next week for the annual contract renewal. He didn't know yet. No one did. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter without answering and stared out the window. 9 years of client relationships, all built on my word and reliability. Brian hadn't just fired an employee today. He'd severed the only connection linking Travis to millions in revenue, and he had no idea. I joined Trevant when it was still Midwestern Financial Services, before the rebranding and the fancy downtown office. Everett himself hired me, straight from a competitor where I'd hit targets but was passed over for promotion. "I want someone who knows this market," he said. "Someone clients can trust." For 7 years, he trusted me. I grew our client base from regional businesses to national accounts. I extended contracts from 1-year terms to 3 and 5 years. I brought in Lockhart Manufacturing after they left our biggest competitor. I signed the Henderson Group when nobody believed we had a chance. My wife, Rebecca, used to joke I was married to my clients. "Thursday night dinner with the Johnsons again?" she'd ask, already knowing the answer. The kids got used to me missing ball games and recitals. Dad's working became their normal. I promised it would pay off one day. 3 promotions, 2 office expansions, and 1 recession later, Trevant had grown from a $4 million operation to a $30 million enterprise, with my accounts accounting for about $12 million of that. Not that anyone had bothered to calculate the exact share until Brian showed up. The first red flag came at a quarterly review meeting 3 months after Brian took over sales. "Your client acquisition rate is flatlining," he said, pointing at a chart showing I'd added only 2 new accounts that quarter. "Because I'm focused on expanding existing relationships," I explained. "The Lockhart contract just doubled." "The future is in new business," Brian shot back. "We need hunters, not farmers." A week later, my executive assistant Julia was reassigned. The next month, my travel request required extra approval. Expense reports came back with questions. Small annoyances. Death by 1,000 cuts. Whispers started about fresh talent interviews. Young MBAs with aggressive sales pitches and zero industry experience. Brian called them disruptors. Last month, he hired Alicia Winters, 29, from a tech startup. During her first week, she was assigned to join me on a call with Travis Ricks. No explanation, no proper introduction, just being shown the ropes. Travis noticed. After the call, he texted me, "Who's the new girl? Training your replacement." I laughed it off. Just expanding the team. But driving home that night, I felt something shift deep in my gut. A certainty earned from years of reading boardrooms and client faces. Something wasn't right. I should have trusted that feeling sooner. I set my cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured 2 fingers of bourbon. The house was quiet. Rebecca was at her sister's in Denver for the week, helping with a newborn, probably for the best. I needed the silence. I pulled out my personal phone and scrolled through contacts. 9 years of relationships, over 200 clients, vendors, and industry contacts. People who trusted me to handle their business. People who signed with Travant because of me, not marketing or fancy offices. My work phone, now disabled in the box, held only official correspondence. The dinner invites, golf outings, personal cell numbers of CEOs and decision-makers. Those were all here, on my personal device. Information I earned by being someone people wanted to work with. I took a sip of bourbon and felt a strange calm wash over me. No panic, no desperation over mortgage payments or health insurance. Just a clear understanding of what had happened and what would come next. The bourbon burned going down. 9 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners and little league games. 9 years building something I thought was mine, only to realize it wasn't. I opened my laptop and pulled up my employment contract. The non-compete clause was there but limited in scope. 1 year and only if I left voluntarily. Being terminated changed that. No legal barrier stood in the way of taking my clients elsewhere. My phone buzzed again. Travis confirming dinner for Thursday. Looking forward to discussing the renewal, I stared at the message for a long moment. Travis Ricks represented $1.7 million in annual business for Travant. Lockhart Manufacturing had been with me for 6 years. Before that, I'd spent 3 years at my previous firm, almost a decade building trust. And Darren wasn't alone. The Henderson Group, Westfield Properties, Carlton Industries, they together brought in another $1.5 million. Every single one had contract renewals coming up within the next 30 days, and all of them dealt exclusively through Darren. He set his glass down and made a firm decision. No calls tonight. No angry emails, no threats. He'd sleep on it, wake clear-headed, and then make exactly 3 calls. Not to vent, not to complain, just to inform his closest clients that he was no longer with Travant as of yesterday. The rest would take care of itself. He pulled out family photos from the box. His daughter's graduation, his son's wedding, the trip to Yellowstone they almost canceled because of a client emergency. He'd already missed too much. Tomorrow, he promised himself, he'd start making different choices. After finishing his bourbon, Darren headed upstairs to an empty house. For the first time in years, he didn't set an alarm. No early flights, no quarterly reports to review before dawn. Just a calm certainty that Brian Ellsworth had made a catastrophic mistake. And all Darren had to do was step aside and let it unfold. The next morning, he made those 3 calls. No drama, just facts. Travis, I'm no longer with Travant as of yesterday. Wanted you to hear it straight from me. Travis's reply was immediate. What happened? Who's handling our account now? Brian Ellsworth will probably reach out. Or maybe Alicia Winters. A pause. The girl from the meeting. She doesn't know our business. That's all I can say. The rest is your call. He had similar conversations with James Henderson and Peter Carlton. No recruitment pitch, no suggestions, just straightforward information delivered with the reliability they'd come to expect from him. By noon, his personal phone was buzzing nonstop. Word travels fast in a small industry. At 2 p.m., Everett Stanton called. Darren let it go to voicemail. "Darren, this is Everett. We need to discuss your transition. Several clients are raising concerns. Please call me back immediately." He didn't. Instead, he drove downtown to meet Lawrence Finch, an employment attorney. 3 years earlier, Darren had helped Lawrence's son-in-law secure financing for a restaurant. Now, Lawrence owed him a favor. "They can't legally stop you from working," Lawrence said after reviewing the termination papers. "But they'll try to scare your clients into staying. Prepare for that." By 4 p.m., Travant's legal department sent an email reminding him of confidentiality obligations. By 5 p.m., Brian texted, "Let's discuss your exit package. There might be consulting opportunities." Too late. At 5:30, his phone buzzed again. "Travis, just got off the phone with your CEO and that VP who fired you. They promised continuity. Said Alicia would handle everything personally. They're offering a 10% discount on renewal. What did you say?" "I told them I'd think about it." Travis replied, "I've sent notice terminating our contract, citing change in relationship management. Henderson and Carlton did the same." Still, Darren said nothing. "Darren, where are you landing? Because wherever you go, that's where our business is headed." That night, 3 more companies from Darren's portfolio sent termination notices to Travant. By morning, the total reached 8 contracts, over $3.2 million in revenue. Everett called an emergency board meeting. Darren knew because Julia, his former assistant, texted him. "Complete chaos here. Brian's trying to pin client tampering on you. CEO's asking why no one saw this coming." Then Darren's phone rang, an unfamiliar number. "Darren McCabe?" "Speaking." "Michael Grantley here. Grantley and Company, a smaller competitor with a better reputation. I hear you're available and several mutual friends speak highly of you." "I'm listening." "Senior Vice President role, 6-figure signing bonus, full autonomy over your own accounts, a seat on the executive committee. When can you start? How does tomorrow sound?" Darren accepted immediately, not out of desperation but because it was exactly what he wanted. Respect, independence, and recognition for his value. That afternoon, Brian texted again. "Board approved a retention package, full salary for 6 months plus stock options. Just help us transition your accounts." Darren didn't reply. There was nothing to say. They'd had 9 years to appreciate what he built. Now they scrambled to put a price on it. Too little and far too late. 1 week into his new role at Grantley and Company, Julia called from a personal number. "You need to know what happened. It wasn't just Brian wanting his own people." Darren sat in his new corner office, bigger than the one at Travant, and listened as 9 years of history fell into place. "They were planning to sell the firm," Julia explained. "Veritas Capital made an offer 2 months ago with conditions. They wanted to bring in their own account managers for major clients to merge them into their existing portfolio." Everything clicked. Brian hadn't been hired to grow sales. He was brought in to transition accounts away from Darren, turning them into company assets rather than relationships tied to one executive. Your termination wasn't about performance. It was preparation for acquisition. "How do you know?" Darren asked. "I'm still assigned to the executive suite. I see the documents, hear the conversations. Yesterday, they pulled the offer. Veritas won't buy without the client base you built." After hanging up, Darren sat quietly for a long time. 9 years of loyalty, and they were willing to cut him off from his clients like removing a middleman. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded too well. The relationships were too strong, too personal. They needed him gone before the clients could be packaged as corporate assets. He opened his laptop and checked his email. More former clients had reached out. The industry was buzzing with the news. Darren McCabe had moved to Grantley, and clients were following. Travant's stock had dropped 12% in 5 days. His phone buzzed again. A text from Everett. "Can we meet? Just you and me? No lawyers." Darren didn't respond right away. The deeper betrayal settled in his stomach like cold lead. Not just fired, deliberately sacrificed in a corporate chess game. He picked up the phone and called Travis Hendress. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Did Travant try to introduce you to anyone from Veritas Capital in the last few months?" A pause. "How did you know?" "They brought in some guy, Thomas, during our quarterly review. Said he was a strategic advisor studying our industry. Asked a lot about our future needs." Confirmation. They'd been parading Veritas representatives in front of his clients, laying groundwork for transition, all while he was still on the payroll. Still believing I was creating something meaningful, I kept making calls and uncovered a consistent pattern. Behind my back, meetings were happening, details collected, relationships examined for vulnerabilities or reasons to replace me. By the end of that day, I had confirmed that at least 6 of my top accounts had quietly been introduced to representatives from Veritas, all posing as strategic advisors or industry consultants. Finally, I messaged Everett. "No need for a meeting. I'm fully aware of the Veritas situation." His reply was swift. "It's strictly a business decision, Darren. Nothing personal, though in reality it feels personal. 9 years of cultivating connections, remembering clients' children's names and favorite vacation spots, taking calls on weekends and holidays, reduced to nothing more than an obstacle in a corporate deal." I shut my laptop and gazed out over the Kansas City skyline from my new office. The view here felt different, somehow clearer. Grantley had already secured contracts with 11 of my former clients, amounting to close to $5 million in yearly revenue, and more were on the way. Not because I was actively recruiting them, but because, in this business, trust follows the individual, not the logo or corporate strategy. Travant hadn't just lost a salesperson. They'd lost the very base their growth was built on, and they still hadn't grasped why. About 3 weeks after I joined Grantley, I received an invitation to speak at the Midwest Financial Services Conference. The panel's theme? Building client loyalty in a transactional market. The irony wasn't lost on me. I accepted, not out of pride or publicity, but because I knew exactly who would be listening. Industry colleagues, potential clients, and most importantly, the remaining leaders at Travant. Everett never missed this event, nor did any of the board members. Meanwhile, Grantley provided resources Travant never had: 2 dedicated analysts, marketing support, and most crucially, equity partnership. Every client I brought in wasn't just a commission check. It was part of building something I owned a stake in. I spent a month preparing, not with flashy presentations or rehearsed stories, but with hard data. Burning the midnight oil with my analysts, I gathered performance stats on every client who'd followed me from Travant to Grantley. The numbers were striking. Average service response time slashed by 53%, implementation costs cut by 30%, and client satisfaction scores increased by 22 points. This wasn't about me. It was proof of what happens when companies put relationships ahead of mere transactions. On the morning of the conference, I went over my notes one last time. No sensational reveals, no calling out names, just facts and figures. Professional, measured, and undeniable. As I entered the hotel ballroom, Everett was easy to spot, deep in conversation with 2 board members near the coffee station. His face tightened the moment he saw me. I nodded politely and moved along. The panel opened with typical questions about market trends and technological disruptions. When my turn came, I spoke candidly about what clients truly value. In an era dominated by automation and digital processes, Personal accountability has become a scarce commodity. Companies often confuse client relationships with company assets. They aren't. They are trust contracts between individuals that require constant nurturing. I shared my data without naming Trevant, only case studies of clients who switched firms and immediately experienced improvements. The takeaway wasn't about retention bonuses or contracts. I concluded that when companies treat relationship managers as interchangeable parts, clients show how badly that assumption fails. During the Conda, a young analyst I didn't recognize asked the question on everyone's mind. Isn't your move from Trevant to Grantley, along with several major clients, exactly the risk companies fear when deciding how much freedom to give relationship managers? The room went quiet. I could feel Everett's gaze piercing me from across the room. That's a fair question, I answered. But consider the alternative. Trevant lost those clients not because I poached them, but because they failed to understand what those clients truly valued. Clients didn't follow me purely out of loyalty. They followed because their needs were consistently better met by my approach, an approach my former employer decided no longer aligned with their strategy. I paused, locking eyes briefly with Everett. Every company has the right to change direction. Every client has the right to decide if that change benefits them. The market is unforgivingly efficient that way. After the panel, 3 more former Trevant clients approached me. By the end of the conference, Grantley had signed letters of intent for 5 new accounts, representing another $2.7 million in annual revenue. That evening, I checked the financial news. Trevant announced restructuring. Brian Ellsworth was moving on. The Veritas acquisition was officially dead. Their stock dropped another 8%. I closed my laptop feeling no satisfaction or triumph, just the quiet conviction that the market had spoken. The lesson was delivered. Whether they learned from it was no longer my concern. 6 months after my firing, I stood in Grantley's largest conference room, surrounded by my team and company leaders. Behind me, one slide displayed quarterly results: $8.4 million in new business, 70% from former Trevant clients. Michael Grantley raised a glass. Best acquisition we've ever made, and we didn't even buy a company. Polite laughter rippled through the room. I smiled but stayed silent. This wasn't a celebration for me. It was validation. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Trevant Corp announced CEO transition. Everett Stanton stepping down amid ongoing revenue challenges. I slipped the phone into my pocket without reaction. Some victories don't need an audience. Later that day, I received an email from Alicia Winters, the young woman Brian had tried to position as my replacement. I've been let go along with most of the sales team. Any chance Grantley is hiring? I forwarded it to HR with a note. Worth interviewing. Not her fault. As I left the office, my assistant handed me an envelope delivered by courier. Inside was a handwritten note from Everett Stanton. You were right. I put transaction above relationship. It cost the company everything. If you're ever willing, I'd appreciate a chance to apologize in person. I folded the note and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Maybe someday. Not yet. That evening, driving home, I passed Trevant's building. The sign was coming down from the building's facade. According to the local business journal, they were moving to a smaller office out in the suburbs. I didn't slow the car or snap a photo. I just kept driving, eyes fixed ahead on the life I was now building on my own terms. Exactly 1 year after Brian had pushed those termination papers across the conference table, I signed the final paperwork that made me a full partner at Grantley Company. Since I'd arrived, the firm had grown by 34%. My client portfolio now accounted for nearly $20 million in annual revenue. I closed the manila folder containing the partnership agreement and gazed out at the familiar Kansas City skyline. The buildings hadn't changed, nor the city, but everything else certainly had. Rebecca walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. Signed and official, I said. She sat down across from me, studying my expression. You don't look as thrilled as I thought you'd be. I shook my head and smiled softly. Just thinking about Trevant and about building something right this time. That morning, I'd approved hiring 3 new account managers, all under the same profit-sharing terms I had negotiated for myself. Nobody here would build something only to have it ripped away. That was my first move as partner. My phone buzzed. A text from Travis Rizzard. Congratulations on the partnership. Knew you'd land on your feet. I typed back. Thanks to clients like you. He corrected me. No, thanks to you being who you are. We just followed the value. After we hung up, I picked up the framed parchment Rebecca had given me last Christmas. It bore a simple quote. The best revenge is massive success. I set it face down on the credenza. That chapter was over. I grabbed my calendar and scheduled lunch with Everett Stanton. Not to gloat, not to dredge up old wounds, but because sometimes the last step forward is letting go of the past. I shut down my computer, grabbed my keys, and headed out to meet Rebecca. We had tickets to our son's band performance, something I never would have made time for in my old life. Some losses clear the path for greater victories. Some fires burn away what needs to be left behind. Today, I was more certain of that than ever before.